Ethan rolled his shoulders, stretching his arms. That's funny. I was about to say the same thing to you. The crowd murmured in excitement. No one had ever spoken to Chiron like this before. A metallic chime echoed through the arena, signaling the start of the duel. Chiron moved first. With a flick of his wrist, a blade of pure energy formed in his hand, crackling with power. He lunged at Ethan with blinding speed, faster than any human should have been able to react to. But Ethan wasn't just any human. He sidestepped at the last moment, pivoting smoothly as Chiron's blade slashed through empty air. The noble's expression flickered with surprise, but he recovered quickly, spinning around and launching another attack. This time, Ethan ducked low, avoiding the blade entirely. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The human wasn't just dodging. He was predicting Chiron's movements. Chiron growled in frustration and changed tactics. He thrust his free hand forward, sending a blast of kinetic energy toward Ethan. The force should have sent him flying, but Ethan planted his feet and absorbed the impact, sliding back only a few inches. Now the murmurs in the crowd turned to shock. Chiron's eyes narrowed. "You're stronger than you look," he admitted, "but strength alone won't save you." Ethan smirked. "Good thing I've got more than strength." Chiron charged again, his attacks becoming faster, more aggressive. Ethan weaved through the strikes, his movements efficient and controlled. He wasn't just dodging anymore. He was analyzing, watching for patterns. Then he saw it. A split-second hesitation in Chiron's footwork, a slight overextension in his reach, a perfect opening. The next time, as Chiron lunged, Ethan stepped inside his guard, twisting around him in a single smooth motion. Before the noble could react, Ethan grabbed his wrist, yanked him forward, and slammed him face first into the ground. The entire arena went silent. Chiron groaned, dazed by the impact. He tried to push himself up, but Ethan was already on him, locking his arm in a tight hold. "Yield," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. Chiron gritted his teeth, his pride warring with reality. He struggled, but Ethan's grip was unbreakable. The human was stronger than he had expected. Too strong. After a long, painful moment, Chiron growled in frustration. "I yield." A loud chime rang through the arena, signaling the end of the duel. The silence stretched on for another second before the crowd erupted. Some were cheering, others were in complete disbelief. A Deathworlder had just defeated a Valari noble in his own game. Ethan stood, releasing Chiron's arm, and took a step back. He glanced up at the instructors' panel. Some looked impressed, others worried. As Chiron staggered to his feet, he glared at Ethan, his golden eyes burning with resentment. "This isn't over, human," he spat. Ethan simply smiled. Didn't think it was. As he walked off the platform, the murmurs around him grew louder. He could feel the shift in the air, the way people were looking at him differently now. He wasn't just a curiosity anymore. He was a problem. And he had just turned the entire academy upside down. Ethan rolled his shoulders, stretching his arms. "That's funny. I was about to say the same thing to you." The crowd murmured in excitement. No one had ever spoken to Chiron like this before. A metallic chime echoed through the arena, signaling the start of the duel. Chiron moved first. With a flick of his wrist, a blade of pure energy formed in his hand, crackling with power. He lunged at Ethan with blinding speed, faster than any human should have been able to react to. But Ethan wasn't just any human. He sidestepped at the last moment, pivoting smoothly as Chiron's blade slashed through empty air. The noble's expression flickered with surprise, but he recovered quickly, spinning around and launching another attack. This time, Ethan ducked low, avoiding the blade entirely. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The human wasn't just dodging. He was predicting Chiron's movements. Chiron growled in frustration and changed tactics. He thrust his free hand forward, sending a blast of kinetic energy toward Ethan. The force should have sent him flying, but Ethan planted his feet and absorbed the impact, sliding back only a few inches. Now the murmurs in the crowd turned to shock. Zyron's eyes narrowed. "You're stronger than you look," he admitted. "But strength alone won't save you." Ethan smirked. "Good thing I've got more than strength." Zyron charged again, his attacks becoming faster, more aggressive. Ethan weaved through the strikes, his movements efficient and controlled. He wasn't just dodging anymore, he was analyzing, watching for patterns. Then he saw it. A split-second hesitation in Zyron's footwork. A slight overextension in his reach. The perfect opening. The next time Zyron lunged, Ethan stepped inside his guard, twisting around him in a single smooth motion. Before the noble could react, Ethan grabbed his wrist, yanked him forward, and slammed him face first into the ground. The entire arena went silent. Zyron groaned, dazed by the impact. He tried to push himself up, but Ethan was already on him, locking his arm in a tight hold. "Yield," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. Zyron gritted his teeth, his pride warring with reality. He struggled, but Ethan's grip was unbreakable. The human was stronger than he had expected. Too strong. After a long, painful moment, Zyron growled in frustration. "I yield." A loud chime rang through the arena, signaling the end of the duel. The silence stretched on for another second before the crowd erupted. Some were cheering, others were in complete disbelief. A Deathworlder had just defeated a Velari noble in his own game. Ethan stood, releasing Zyron's arm, and took a step back. He glanced up at the instructors panel. Some looked impressed, others worried. As Zyron staggered to his feet, he glared at Ethan, his golden eyes burning with resentment. "This isn't over, human," he spat. Ethan simply smiled. Didn't think it was. As he walked off the platform, the murmurs around him grew louder. He could feel the shift in the air, the way people were looking at him differently now. He wasn't just a curiosity anymore. He was a problem. And he had just turned the entire academy upside down. The aftermath of the duel spread through the academy like wildfire. By the time Ethan walked back to his quarters, he could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. Whispers followed in his wake, a mixture of awe, disbelief, and something else, something darker. Fear. The noble families had ruled the academy for generations, their status unchallenged, their superiority unquestioned. But in a single fight, a human, a Deathworlder, had shattered that illusion. Ethan knew this wasn't over. Zyron's pride had taken a hit, and nobles didn't take humiliation lightly. There would be consequences. That night, as Ethan was finishing his meal, his door chimed. He wiped his hands on his uniform and opened it, expecting another curious student. Instead, he found himself facing 3 Velari. They were tall, their frames lean and powerful, their golden eyes gleaming with contempt. Ethan Drake, the one in the center, said, "Come with us." Ethan raised an eyebrow. Not even a please. The Velari's jaw tightened. "The High Council of the Academy requests your presence." Ethan glanced at the other 2. Their uniforms were different from regular students, sleek, black, with an insignia on their shoulders. Security. He sighed. "Fine. Lead the way." They walked in silence through the dimly lit corridors. The Academy's architecture was a blend of sleek modern design and ancient influences, with towering columns and walls lined with intricate carvings of Velari history. Ethan had barely begun learning about their culture, but one thing was clear. The Velari were a people obsessed with power and legacy. They arrived at a grand chamber, its doors massive and adorned with glowing Velari script. The guards opened them, and Ethan stepped inside. The High Council sat on an elevated platform, their robes shimmering under the soft blue lights of the chamber. There were 5 of them, each representing a ruling house of the Velari elite. Zyron's father, Lord Veros, sat in the center, his piercing golden eyes locked onto Ethan the moment he entered. Ethan took a slow breath. He had expected trouble, but this was beyond what he anticipated. You have disrupted the order of this academy, Lord Veros said, his voice cold. You humiliated my son before the entire student body. This cannot go unanswered. Ethan folded his arms. Your son challenged me. I followed the rules. A murmur rippled through the council members. One of them, an older Valori woman with sharp features, leaned forward. That is true. The duel was sanctioned and fair. However, the implications of your victory are troubling. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Implications? You are a Deathworlder, another council member said. You come from a planet of chaos, violence, and destruction. Your very presence here is already controversial. And now you have proven that a Deathworlder can surpass one of our finest students. Do you understand what that means? Ethan did. It meant the illusion of Valeri's superiority had cracked. If one human could defeat a noble warrior, what did that say about the rest of the galaxy? Lord Veros's voice was like a blade. You will apologize publicly. You will acknowledge that Siron's defeat was a fluke, an accident, and you will conduct yourself with humility from now on. Ethan stared at him. He could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on him, the unspoken threat in their words. They wanted to make an example of him, to reassert their dominance. A lesser person might have given in. Ethan smiled. No. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Lord Veros' expression darkened. Excuse me. I won the fight. Fair and square. I won't lie just to make you feel better. Ethan's voice was calm, steady. If your people can't handle the idea that a human beat one of your own, then maybe you should be asking yourselves why. The murmurs turned into outright shock. No one had ever spoken to the High Council like this. Lord Veros rose to his feet, his presence radiating fury. You dare defy the council. Ethan met his gaze without flinching. I'm just telling the truth. One of the other council members spoke up, his voice measured. Perhaps we should not make hasty decisions. The human has talent. It would be unwise to. Lord Veros cut him off with a sharp gesture. Enough. He turned back to Ethan, his expression now unreadable. Very well, human. If you refuse to submit, then you must prove your place in this academy. Ethan's instincts sharpened. How? Lord Veros' lips curled into a cold smile. You will participate in the trials of the Ascendant. A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. Even the other council members looked surprised. Ethan had no idea what the trials were, but he could tell from the reaction that they weren't a simple test. One of the council members hesitated. Lord Veros, the trials air. Fitting. Lord Veros interrupted. If the human wishes to stand among us, then let him face our greatest challenge. Ethan looked at the council, then at the guards standing by the door. He could see the trap being laid for him. This wasn't about proving himself, it was about breaking him. But if they thought he was afraid, they were mistaken. Ethan smirked. Fine. When do we start? The news of Ethan's participation in the trials of the Ascendant spread like wildfire. The academy halls buzzed with whispers, speculation, and outright disbelief. No outsider had ever been allowed to take part in the trials. Even among the Valori, only the strongest, most elite students dared to compete. It was not just a test. It was a brutal gauntlet designed to push warriors to their limits, to separate the weak from the worthy. For Ethan, it was clearly a trap, but that didn't mean he was going to back down. As he made his way through the academy, he could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes watching him. Some students whispered in hushed tones, others sneered openly. A group of nobles laughed as he passed. He won't last 5 minutes, one of them scoffed. He's just a Deathworlder, probably thinks brute strength is enough to survive. Ethan ignored them. He had more important things to focus on. That evening, as he was studying in his quarters, his door chimed. He opened it to find a familiar face, Zara, one of the few Valori students who had been neutral toward him. She was a strategist, quiet but sharp. She stepped inside and crossed her arms. You really agreed to the trials? Ethan smirked. What? Don't think I can handle it. She sighed. It's not about handling it. It's about surviving it. Ethan leaned against the wall. You're acting like it's some kind of death sentence. Zara hesitated. Because for you, it might be. That caught Ethan's attention. He had expected the trials to be difficult, but Zara's tone suggested something worse. What aren't they telling me? He asked. Zara exhaled slowly. The trials are designed to push a Velari warrior to their breaking point. The first stage is endurance, grueling physical challenges meant to weed out the weak. The second stage is combat, one-on-one battles where anything goes. Ethan nodded. That much was expected. And the third? Zara hesitated before answering. The gauntlet. Ethan frowned. The gauntlet. She lowered her voice. It's a final challenge. An arena filled with unpredictable dangers. You don't just fight an opponent. You fight the environment, the traps, and whatever the council decides to throw at you. Ethan's expression hardened. So that was their plan. Lord Veros wasn't just trying to humiliate him. He was trying to break him, maybe even get rid of him entirely. Ethan met Zara's gaze. Thanks for the warning, but I'm not backing down. She studied him for a long moment, then sighed. I didn't think you would. She reached into her belt and tossed him a small metallic device. Ethan caught it and examined it. Some kind of data chip. What's this? Training simulations. If you're going to survive, you'll need to understand how Velari fight. Study them. Ethan smiled. Appreciate it. Zara rolled her eyes. Don't thank me yet. Just try not to die. She left, and Ethan inserted the chip into his console. The screen flickered to life, displaying a detailed analysis of past trials. He watched as Velari warriors sprinted across brutal obstacle courses, dodged energy blasts, and fought duels with electrified blades. The combat was fast, precise, every move calculated, every strike deadly. Ethan's grin widened. This was going to be fun. You said. The trials of the Ascendant had begun. Ethan stood at the starting line of the first stage, surrounded by Velari warriors dressed in their Academy-issued training gear. The arena stretched before them, a brutal course filled with towering walls, electrified pits, and shifting platforms that seemed designed to break even the strongest competitors. The crowd roared in anticipation. Thousands of students, professors, and high-ranking nobles filled the viewing stands, all eager to see how the Deathworlder would fare. Lord Veros stood on the high balcony, his expression unreadable. But Ethan could feel the challenge in his gaze. Competitors, the announcer's voice boomed across the arena. Your first test is the path of endurance. Only the fastest, strongest, and most adaptable will advance. Ethan rolled his shoulders, taking a deep breath. He had been through military obstacle courses back on Earth. This couldn't be that different, except for the part where it was designed by aliens who wanted him dead. A loud buzzer echoed through the stadium. The trial had begun. The first section was a sprint through shifting terrain. Ethan exploded forward, his muscles tensed as the ground beneath him moved unexpectedly. Sections of the track tilted, collapsed, or rearranged without warning. One Velari miscalculated, stepping onto a platform just as it dropped out beneath him. He barely managed to catch himself before falling into the electrified pit below. Ethan adapted fast, his instincts kicking in. He leaped over gaps, adjusted his footing midair, and slid under barriers with the reflexes of a trained soldier. Other competitors weren't so lucky. Screams and curses filled the air as warriors were caught off guard, stumbling into pitfalls or getting thrown off course. Ethan smirked. This was just another day of training for a human. The next section was the climbing wall of blades. A massive vertical wall stood before them, covered in retractable energy blades that extended at random intervals. The goal was to reach the top without getting sliced apart. The Velari used their natural agility, darting between safe spots and climbing with impressive speed. Ethan took a different approach. Instead of hesitating, he ran straight up, using momentum to launch himself higher. The crowd gasped as he pushed off a ledge, twisted in midair to avoid a blade, and grabbed a higher hold. A warrior beside him hesitated for a second too long. Shek. The energy blade cut through his sleeve, leaving a burned gash on his arm. He cried out and lost his grip, falling. Ethan didn't stop. He reached the top, vaulted over the edge, and sprinted to the next section. The third challenge was the Gauntlet of Precision. Drones hovered above, launching stun projectiles at competitors as they navigated a narrow beam over a deep pit. Ethan's reflexes took over. He dodged left, then right, the stun blasts barely missing him. One warrior ahead of him got hit. His body locked up, and he tumbled into the pit below. Ethan bent low, reducing his profile. He moved fast, unpredictable. A shot came for his head. He ducked. Another aimed for his leg. He jumped over it. He reached the other side unscathed. By the time the final buzzer sounded, only 5 competitors remained standing. Ethan was one of them. The crowd was silent for a moment, then erupted into cheers and gasps. Even those who had mocked him before now looked at him with wide eyes. Zara, watching from the stands, shook her head with a small smirk. Unbelievable. Lord Veros narrowed his eyes. Ethan stretched his arms and cracked his neck. That was fun. But he knew this was just the beginning. The next stage of the trials of the Ascendant was where things truly became dangerous. Ethan stood in the center of the combat arena, his muscles still tense from the endurance trial. The sun was setting over the academy, casting long shadows across the battlefield. The ground was a mixture of metallic platforms and shifting sandpits, designed to keep fighters unbalanced. Around him, thousands of Valeri spectators watched from the stands, their excitement reaching a fever pitch. This was what they had been waiting for. Warriors. The announcer's voice echoed through the arena. You have proven your endurance. Now you must prove your strength. The trial of combat begins. A massive holographic screen flickered to life above them, displaying the matchups. The fights would be one-on-one duels, with the victors advancing to the final round. Ethan scanned the list. His opponent's name flashed in bold red letters. Ethan Ross versus Kirak Veros. The crowd erupted in shock and excitement. Kirak, the son of Lord Veros, the Academy's most decorated warrior, and the one who had been watching Ethan with contempt since his arrival. Ethan exhaled. Of course. Kirak leaped down into the arena, his tall frame clad in dark combat armor. His eyes locked onto Ethan with a predatory grin. You should have left while you had the chance, human, Kirak sneered. Now I get to show everyone why your kind doesn't belong here. Ethan smirked. That's so. Guess we'll find out. The announcer raised a hand. Begin. Kirak lunged without hesitation. His movements were fast, precise, deadly, far quicker than any human Ethan had ever fought. He came in low, sweeping for Ethan's legs with a curved energy blade. Ethan dodged, barely. The blade sliced the air where his legs had been a second ago. He jumped back, analyzing Kirak's stance. The Valeri fought like a duelist, precise but aggressive. Kirak pressed forward, slashing again. Ethan ducked under the attack and countered with a quick jab to Kirak's ribs. His fist connected, but it was like punching solid steel. Kirak didn't even flinch. Instead, he grabbed Ethan's wrist and twisted, hurling him through the air. Ethan hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. The crowd roared. Kirak laughed. Is that all, Deathworlder? Ethan wiped the blood from his lip and grinned. Nah, I'm just getting started. He adjusted his stance. The Valeri were faster, stronger, but humans were unpredictable. Kirak came at him again, blade flashing. This time, Ethan didn't retreat. Instead, he sidestepped at the last second. Kirak's momentum carried him forward just enough for Ethan to bring his elbow crashing down on the back of his head. Kirak stumbled. The crowd gasped. Ethan didn't give him time to recover. He rushed in, delivering a brutal series of blows. A right hook to the jaw, a knee to the stomach, a hammer fist to the shoulder joint. Kirek roared in frustration and swung wildly. Ethan ducked under it and swept Kirek's legs out from under him. The Velari crashed to the ground. For the first time, silence fell over the arena. Kirek's eyes burned with fury. He shoved himself up, his breathing ragged. You dare. Ethan stepped forward, placing his boot on Kirek's chest, a clear sign of victory. The buzzer sounded. Winner, Ethan Ross. The arena erupted. Some cheered, others stared in stunned disbelief. Lord Vero's face was stone cold, his jaw tightening. Ethan stepped back, looking down at Kirek. Guess your kind isn't as untouchable as you thought. Kirek said nothing, his fists clenched in rage. Ethan turned and walked away, the weight of thousands of stunned eyes on him. He had done the impossible. And now, the entire Academy knew the Deathworlder was here to stay. You said. The Academy was in shock. Ethan's victory over Kirek had sent ripples through the entire institution. Whispers followed him through the halls. Some students stared in awe, others in resentment. Even the instructors regarded him with a new level of wariness. But Ethan didn't care. He wasn't here to make friends. He was here to prove a point. And now he had made it loud and clear. However, the real challenge had just begun. The final stage of the trials was approaching. A test that would separate the strongest from the rest. A challenge that would determine who was truly worthy of the Academy's highest honor. The trial of survival. The details were vague, but from what Ethan had overheard, it was an extreme combat scenario, one designed to push warriors to their limits. And he was certain of one thing. They would do everything in their power to break him. Ethan stood in the prep chamber, strapping on his combat gear. Zara appeared beside him, arms crossed. You made enemies, she said bluntly. Ethan smirked. Yeah, I noticed. You humiliated Kirek in front of everyone. He'll want revenge. Ethan tightened the straps on his gloves. Let him come. Zara sighed, shaking her head. You really don't get how things work here, do you? Ethan looked up. Then explain. She hesitated, then said, the trial of survival. It's different for everyone. The Academy tailors it to each warrior's weaknesses, and after what you did to Kirek, they're going to make yours a nightmare. Ethan frowned. Let me guess. The trial is randomly assigned by the Academy's council. Zara nodded. Ethan exhaled through his nose. So, it's rigged. Not officially, Zara said. But Lord Veros has influence, and after what you did to his son, she lowered her voice. They won't let you win easily. Ethan clenched his fists. I never expected them to. She studied him for a moment, then smirked. You really are different. Before Ethan could respond, the loudspeakers crackled to life. All competitors report to the trial of survival arena immediately. Zara gave him a serious look. Stay alive, Deathworlder. Ethan grinned. Wouldn't dream of doing anything else. The trial of survival was held deep beneath the Academy, in a vast, simulated war zone. Towering metallic walls surrounded the battlefield, and drones hovered above, scanning the warriors below. The competitors were scattered across the field, each armed with only a basic combat knife. The goal? Survive. But Ethan knew better. This wasn't about survival. This was a hunt, and he was the prey. A loud buzzer sounded. The trial had begun. Ethan immediately took cover behind a jagged rock formation, scanning his surroundings. He could already see warriors moving toward him, their expressions hungry for vengeance. Kirek was among them. Ethan smirked. Figures. He had one knife, limited supplies, and an entire arena full of aliens who wanted him dead. But there was one thing they had forgotten. Ethan Ross wasn't just a student. He was a Deathworlder. And this was just another fight to win.